While going to St. Olaf College, I signed up for the U.S. Navy officer program and went to Newport, Rhode Island for officer training after being in Europe for about 6 months. On my way, I stopped by and saw my relatives, Kathy, Gordon Waddles, and just had a chance to see them. This is at the Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island. While there, a friend of mine at the school asked if I wanted to go home with him. It turned out his parents were running Williamsburg, and so an opportunity to eat where George Washington ate with the plates and the whole thing, and had an amazing experience there. So it was quite fun to have that experience, among others, when I was at Newport, Rhode Island's Officer Training School, including going to the Newport Jazz Festival and seeing Louis Armstrong and that sort of thing. My parents came to visit me while I was at graduating from OCS in Newport, and I then wound up in the Supply Corps and wound up going to U.S. Navy Supply Corps School in Athens, Georgia, which is kind of the country club of the Navy. Enjoyed that 6-month experience there very much, and had a wonderful time there. We put on a program for the rest of the classes there about the Navy, and wound up then going down to San Diego, California, and was assigned to the USS Iwo Jima LPH-2. Our home was on Mission Beach, although we spent most of our time aboard ship, heading to Vietnam for 2 6-month periods. This is a picture going up the gangway to the entrance of the ship when we were in port. The officer deck I was officer of the deck periodically. I never did run the ship itself, but I was in charge of the ship while we were in port some of the time. We were loading up to go to Vietnam and hauled equipment, mini helicopters and so forth. My roommate here is shown in charge of the ship at that point while we were underway. At the time, we'd have dignitaries come like a general or admiral aboard ship. We went up with 2 6-month tours in Vietnam, including going to Quy Nhon, Chu Lai, Da Nang, and places like that. While we were there, we also visited many different countries for shorter periods of time. We hauled to Vietnam many different things, but mainly helicopters on the flight deck, fully cocooned, and when we did take them off and got to Vietnam, every one of them did fly off. We had 50 officers, 500 Navy people, and about 2,000 Marines when we were traveling over to Vietnam. We brought a lot less back. In fact, pretty much none of them. Ship was very top heavy, and so you can see here we would rock and roll and a lot, and I did get seasick, and was seasick a good portion of the time that we were at sea. And while we did have a little time to relax, most of the time we were very busy. This is a picture of the captain's boat rig, which is being dropped down into the water, which we used to go to various places from when we're anchored offshore. I had several different divisions when I was on my 3 years rather, aboard ship. And the first assignment I had was the dispersing officer, which included the financial part of the ship. We had a ship store. We had a post office. We had many things going on, which was in charge of the money plus paying people. Also had in charge of paying people on other ships. You'll notice here they would got a bag with the money in it and a buoy in case I dropped it into the ocean. Here it's shown I'm just heading off from the Philippines to Hong Kong to go ahead of the ship to prepare for the ship coming into port there, and so I was able to change money into the currency that would be used, and then fly back to the ship so people would be paid before we reached port and the people were dropped off on leave. Here it's my most fun thing, being dropped down out of a helicopter into smaller ships to pay them. So like in Hong Kong, I would pick up $1 million in small bills and then take them and drop them down onto other ships and pay the people there. So I paid other ships as well as our own ship. The main helicopters over here were aboard ship were used for virtually everything. Amazing. This is one of the divisions I had. I had 15 Filipinos working for me, serving many of the officers and cooking and taking care of their quarters and so forth. And so I got quite close to the Philippines, and the Philippines was our home away from home. and I really appreciated the Filipinos and the time there. One of the things we did was have parties aboard on the flight deck of the ship, in which we would serve meals and that sort of thing. We're having a tug of war here with the Marines, I believe, and the Navy. We basically served great meals, barbecue out on the deck. Example of making some soup here, or maybe that's chili. I was the first officer in charge of installing a computer aboard our ship. There had never been a computer on before, and so the computer would basically we punched cards and stored it, the information, and wound up doing things that a watch can do much better nowadays. Everything in Vietnam was based on the helicopter, almost evacuation, supply, landing, and so forth. And so we were very, very busy all the time. As examples of some of the helicopters and what we're doing and working on projects to make sure that everybody is supplied and so forth. So we are receiving supplies from other cargo ships to our ship, and we'd also been delivering those to Vietnam and to other places. So the helicopters, again, were used for pretty much everything, and I enjoyed being on them, and I was in the air as often as I could be. Never had a crash landing, although we did have one radio catch fire aboard the helicopter I was on. We had 2 hangar bays on the ship, or 1 hangar bay and 2 elevators would go up and down between the hangar bay and the flight deck. The people on the flight deck had different color uniforms based on what their job was aboard there, whether firefighters or whatever. So one of the helicopters, they were loading some of the things we brought over from the United States to Vietnam. We're loading them onto boats that would then go and bring them to shore. The Marines would also be landed from our ship, but they also landed from other ships. The idea was vertical envelopment, where the helicopters would fly over and the other side of the enemy, and the Marines would land, or Army would land on the beach, and they would pinch the men. USS Iwo Jima LPH-2 was used, landing platform helicopter was used for many things in Vietnam. However, we were not very good at with our guns, and so we were pretty much practiced, and I was in charge of one of the guns to make sure they didn't shoot anything they weren't supposed to shoot at. Very hard on my ears, but I survived that well. So we would aim at a plane pulling a target behind it, and we would aim and shoot those targets and see if we could hit them. This is my boss in this case, who is Lieutenant Commander James Hill. We're off the coast here of the island of Iwo Jima, and so what's the ship was named for. So we didn't land on the island, but we did go by it and have a chance to see it. In Vietnam, the main food was rice, and the rice paddies were amazing. They were all over, and it was absolutely gorgeous. The beaches are white sand beaches, beautiful beaches. And it was really sad to see the destruction that occurred over there. This is me in Queen Anne, one of the places we stopped, and this is an officer that gave me a photo album as a gift, which was really wonderful. This is his wife, and the other person on the right is a Filipino friend of mine. So the base there was very active. It was mainly sand, but they were putting down base for planes to land on. Some of the people in Vietnam obviously lived a different lifestyle than what they had seen when we arrived with all our equipment and everything, which was very advanced for them, but very primitive considering nowadays. There are many, many little boats that they had for fishing and so forth to supply their people. We had guns mainly like this one aboard ship, and also all the helicopters had guns on them, mainly because there was small fire going at the ship or at the planes and from little boats like these. And so it was kind of ridiculous, the comparison, but we did need to do that to keep people from firing on the ship and on the helicopters. Some of the Vietnamese officers here. The Marines and the Army had many different landing craft, watercraft, planes, and so forth. And so, and some of those we needed a lot of help getting in and out of the beaches. the CBs were there building ramps and doing things. This is basically a load of people going to the beach there for a beach party. In this case, you can see some of the different colored uniforms there for the people on the flight deck, and there was an anniversary party there. This is the Iwo Jima underway, pictures some of which I took. We also traveled with a couple other ships from the amphibious fleet, which included a landing ship tank and an LSD landing ship dock. We also were involved with the flagship there of the 7th Fleet. And here we are in Vietnam. I'm on the flight deck and I'm watching the bombing and the things going on there while the Marines are landing and the fighting is going on the shore. So I was able to watch this, but very much appreciate the fact I wasn't there on the beach during the battles that were going on. So while we were bombing and we had planes and we had ships, we did not have a lot of opposition coming at us. And so it was quite an unusual experience for being at war where I didn't feel too much attacked. However, the helicopter is different. There's bullet holes in the helicopter. They land, they take a look and see nothing leaking, so they just take off again. And of course, a lot of people were injured, dead, and a lot of bodies coming back, a lot of Vietnamese coming back, getting help. And we had a small hospital, a small dental operation on board, and so we could help with some of the wounded and they have a place to have body bags and so forth. This is on the elevator, getting ready to go down to the area with the wounded coming back from battle. One of the Huey helicopters being reloaded with arms and so forth. I took this picture there, and 2 helicopters collided in back of the ship, cut that helicopter in half, and that man actually survived it. This is a article from the newspaper in the Twin Cities talking about our ship in the battle. Many things happened, one of which was that the destroyer had gone ashore, it hit a coral reef and was hung up, and we tried to get it off. We supplied that and worked there for some time. I had many opportunities, though, to visit other cities, other places, other countries, and so this is Okinawa. We stopped there for a few days. The man I was with from the Navy has been on a submarine that had been sunk in World War II, and he had just gotten off in the Okinawa, and then it was sunk after he got off, so it was quite emotional for him. Here we are anchored out in the bay in Hong Kong. Hong Kong was a wonderful place to be. This is a floating restaurant there. Again, one of the things I did there would be go to the bank and pick up $1 million and bring it out to the ship and pay people from that. And again, this is floating city. It was there. It's now no longer there, I understand. But the people there, many of which would live in the floating city, would never ever get off it. Very unusual, and I helped support a girl go to school there. This is Hong Kong also, looking over to Kowloon from Hong Kong. Yeah, they're painting a ship while we're in port in Hong Kong. They painted the ship. The woman there in the front there has got a baby on her back, and she's worked all day painting a ship, so they really worked hard. Once in a while, we'd have somebody come on board that had or to entertain us, and so they did have a few groups to come in to entertain the troops when we were there. I understand Bob Hope was there one time. This is a snake, actually, in the background there for where you get food. So again, this is Hong Kong, and from there we went like to Japan as an example. We were in Japan for a while. We were actually there for a month while we were in dry dock because we had contaminated fuel tanks and we needed to get that repaired. So we had a chance to be there and then go to a place there, a village, a resort. Everybody in one resort wore a specific kimono, so you could tell what resort people were from by the kimonos they wore. We also went and visited some of the outlying places. Just asked them to take us to a place outside the city so we get to see the people, and took us to a home there, and we had a meal. Man on the right's a Filipino, the first Filipino officer in the Navy, as far as I know. Nagasaki, where the bombing of first atomic bomb was dropped. My home away from home was in the Philippines, and this is some pictures from that. The kids are playing with a turtle, and we had a chance to be there on the beach and hang out with the natives. In fact, hang out with the people that work for me. This is a man who worked for me in the Navy. He made more money than anybody in his village. Anyway, we were there. They did a whole pig for us, roasted a whole pig. And many beautiful beaches, beautiful places there, and I really appreciated the gorgeous weather and also the fruit and the food, and of course the beautiful sunsets. In the Philippines, they call them jeepneys, but that was our transportation. They were old jeeps that had been all decorated up. And so they would take us wherever we wanted to go around the Philippines, or at least to Luzon, the main island of the Philippines, where we were at mainly. Obviously, times have changed now, but back then, this was the main workhorse, you might say, was the ox, the water buffalo. It's a funeral there in the Philippines. In Olongapo, where our ship was in port mainly, there was a place in the water there that people would have to throw money to them and they'd try and catch it. If they didn't catch it, they would dive in the water after it. If one of us ever got wound up in that very septic situation, they would immediately haul us to the emergency room because the water was so toxic. Love the fruit. This is mango, for instance, that I picked up there and enjoyed back at the ship. I had a chance to take a few little excursions like up this river. I was blessed to have the local people give me a ride and show me around the area, the rural areas, and also then went to Sunripe Coconut. We had Gehrke Company, my father's company, had been selling coconut for this company in the Philippines, and so the owner of the company took me to his plant, and here they are hauling coconuts, selling coconuts, and a chance to visit with him. He had a picture of his wall. I said, "Who's that?" He said, "It's his father in Chiang Kai-shek." So he was actually from Taiwan, Formosa, and I'm sitting on a water buffalo. Again, beautiful food available in the Philippines, but also in Vietnam. Was the main reason that the Chinese wanted to take over Vietnam is because they wanted that food source. There's a picture of the executive officer and myself and one of the surgeons aboard ship. As we came in back into the United States from the port, it was a wonderful thing to be able to see land and be back home. Here we are arriving in the Philippines, just where the Arizona is sunk here in the Philippines, and of course Oahu and beautiful beaches there. The dentist aboard our ship met a Filipino girl and married her when we got back on board ship, and so we had some things happened and changing relationships aboard that time. We were gone for 6 months. I was best man at this man's, another officer friend of mine's wedding. The ship itself had been involved in many things over the years, and among them was the recovery of the Apollo 13 astronauts when they came back to Earth after their almost losing their life there. So it was an amazing ship. It had been many experiences, which I was probably part of. The chaplain aboard ship was in charge of the band also, and so we play when we would come into port or certain things like that, coming into Hawaii or whatever. And of course, coming back home after being gone 6 months was an incredible experience. I was blessed at one point to have my grandfather and my cousin, Bruce Webb, and his wife Judy, there to meet me when I came back to San Diego. And we went to down from there, I got off the ship and went down to Tijuana and had some good Mexican food and hung out down there with my grandfather, Edward Albert Gehrke, and Bruce Webb and his wife Judy. Well, I saved up enough money since I didn't do much there in Vietnam as far as spending money, so I was able to buy myself a little sports car when I got back, and able to have a chance to drive that back home to Minnesota. So I was lucky enough to be able to be in Arizona with my parents and family, met them back there. But it's nothing like coming home. It was wonderful to be home. Quite a shift from the world that I've been involved in. I stayed as a reserve officer until 1970. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.